With the escalating Asia's geopolitical tensions and heightened financial stability concerns, let's discuss on Asia's economic recovery and challenges. Russian invasion of Ukraine has upended global economic outlook and greatly amplified uncertainty for a world economy still contending with COVID. Pandemic was fueled by the highly transmissible Omicron variant at the start of 2022. As of 9th March, 66.6% of the region's population was fully vaccinated, compared to 65.2% in the US and 72.6% in the European Union. Omicron's less severe health impact, coupled with increased immunity, allowed developing Asia to remain relatively open in early 2022. Developing Asia's economy rebounded by 6.9% in 2021, but the recovery is still largely incomplete in most of the regions. Expansion in the Caucasus and Central Asia, supported by higher commodity prices, nevertheless left the gross domestic product GDP at 4% below its pre-pandemic trend. In South Asia, the gap remained at about 8%, despite strong growth led by a surge in consumption and investment in India. Southeast Asia's gap was 10%, and the Asia Pacific's it is 12%. The recovery in these subregions was delayed by severe pandemic containment restrictions on domestic activity and international travel, which specially hampered tourism dependent economies. East Asia bucked the trend on buoyant external demand. Its gap was just 1% below the pre pandemic trend. Remittances remained resilient. Tourism showed signs of incipient recovery. Resilience remittances continued in the third quarter of last year when they were 7% above the same quarter in 2019. Tourist arrivals remain negligible in economies still quarantining incoming travelers. But where restrictions were lifted, arrivals, particularly from Europe, have picked up. Asia's financial conditions have weakened slightly since late 2021. Financial conditions have softened since November, tracking expectations of a shift in the Federal Reserve's monetary stance and then the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Most regional currencies depreciated in 2021, a trend that continued in the first 10 weeks of 2022. Risk premiums started rising since November, and strong gains in regional equity markets have gradually given way to losses. Excluding China, region recorded net portfolio outflows last year, but foreign direct investment from both within and outside the region exceeded pre-pandemic levels on solid medium-term fundamentals. Fiscal and monetary policies in developing Asian economies remain broadly accommodative, but the region may be on the cusp of tightening cycle. While fiscal policy remained supportive, even after substantial loosening to cushion the impact of COVID in 2022 and 2021, authorities are expected to start unwinding pandemic emergency measures and gradually shift to fiscal consolidation this year and next. A few central banks started tightening their stances in the second half of 21, and others are expected to follow in response to domestic macroeconomic conditions, including rising inflationary pressures. GDP growth in developing Asia is expected to stay strong at 5.2 in 2022 and 5.3 in 2023. The pace of the recovery, however, varies across subregions. In general, regional growth is being supported by a robust recovery in domestic demand in economies that are continuing to catch up with their pre pandemic trend, particularly in South Asia. Growth will remain strong in 2022 at a forecast of 7%, accelerating to 7.4% in 2023. East Asia converged to its pre pandemic trend in 2021, and growth rates are expected to normalize to 4.7% in 2022 and 4.5% in 2023. Growth rates in other sub-regions will return to their pre-pandemic averages this year or next. Inflation in Asia stayed below the global trend in 2021. Because of relatively low food inflation, less severe supply disruptions, and the incomplete recovery, regional inflation remained moderate at 2.5% last year. Price pressures were less broad-based than in advanced economies, including the US, where inflation averaged 4.3%, and emerging economies in Latin America and the Caribbean and Sub-Saharan Africa, where prices increased by 9.3% and 10.7% respectively. Inflation for this year and next year will be driven by continuing recovery and elevated energy and commodity prices. Regional inflation rate is forecasted to rise to 3.7% in 2022 before dipping to 3.1% in 23. Headline inflation is expected to accelerate in all sub-regions but the Caucasus and Central Asia. Monetary authorities should keep a close watch for incipient inflationary pressures. Developing Asia's current account surplus is forecast to narrow from 1.3% of GDP in 21 to 0.9% this year and inch up to 1% in 23. Export volumes from China stabilized last year but continued to rise in the rest of the region to reach 18% above pre-pandemic levels in December. Over the forecast horizon, slower growth rates and shifting consumption back towards services in advanced economies will temper demand for developing Asia's exports, while imports will rise as economies recover. East Asia's current account surpluses will continue to shrink, while deficits will widen in South Asia. Commodity exporting economies, such as those in Caucasus and Central Asia, will mostly see current account improving this year. Several downside risks could cloud developing Asia's outlook. Escalating global geopolitical tensions arising from the Russian invasion of Ukraine could spill over to the region, particularly via sharper than expected increases in commodity prices and heightened financial stability risks. Aggressive monetary policy tightening in the US may trigger financial market volatility, rapid capital outflows, and sharp currency depreciations. COVID-19 remains a threat, as more deadly variants could still emerge, and China's current Omicron outbreaks could jeopardize regional growth and supply chains. In the medium term, scarring from the pandemic poses significant risks, including learning losses from continued school closures that could further exacerbate economic inequality. Reference for today's presentation is from Asian Development Bank's report issued in April, titled as Asian Development Outlook 2022. Thanks for watching.